COVID lockdown insanity, the COVID deaths it prevented, the depression and suicides it caused, what we should have done, and what it shows we could do now to address real crises. Updated with new data. By Hugh Mctavish, Ph.D. Copyright 2021, Hugh Mctavish. Updated edition copyright 2024, Hugh Mctavish. Audiobook copyright 2024, Hugh Mctavish. Read by Hugh Mctavish. Published by West Fork Press, St. Paul, Minnesota. Dedication. This book is dedicated to the children and young people of the world who have been hurt the most by the lockdowns, for no benefit to themselves, and in the case of children, entirely without their consent. Introduction. Our response to COVID has surprised, fascinated, and appalled me from the beginning. It seemed obvious to me from the beginning that we were vastly overreacting to this pandemic and doing more harm than good. For a moment in the spring of 2020, I doubted my position, thinking basically, every country in the world is reacting to this with lockdowns. The health departments in almost every country in the world are in favor of lockdowns. What are the odds I am right and practically every other expert in the world is wrong? But it turns out I was right. And it turns out I was not the only expert who thought at the beginning that this was a vast overreaction. It is just that the tech giants and the media did not allow these experts to express their point of view, just as they would do to me. I also knew COVID was not trivial, and that I and everyone was likely to contract it, and that there was a small possibility, maybe 1 in 1,000, that I would die from it at my age. My main fear from that was not that I might die, but that if I did, people would laugh at me and mock me because I had been outspoken in saying we had overreacted to COVID. The heart of this book is an examination of the evidence of, first, how many COVID deaths has the lockdown strategy prevented, and second, how much harm has it done, mostly not in economic terms, but in human terms, including increasing suicides, drug overdose deaths, and clinical depression. It is shocking to me that the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and our government officials have never estimated or made any claims of how many COVID infections and COVID deaths the lockdown strategy has prevented, let alone any estimate of how much harm lockdowns have done. It is treated as if we had no choice. We had to close schools, issue stay-at-home orders, order mask wearing, close restaurants, close churches, etc. And since we had no choice, I guess we are supposed to think it is pointless and heartless toward the elderly and the 550,000 who have died of COVID-19 in the U.S. to ask whether and to what extent the lockdown strategy worked, i.e., how many COVID deaths did it prevent? Oh well, call me heartless, but I will ask anyway. When you have terminal cancer and your doctor gives you the option to take chemotherapy, I think it is perfectly reasonable to ask whether it would do you any good and how much additional time of life it will get you. In fact, of course, it would be malpractice for your doctor not to give you an estimate of how much time of life chemotherapy would give you, even if you did not ask. In a like manner, we should ask, and our leaders and experts should also have asked and told us, how many COVID deaths would be prevented by the lockdowns, and now that we are a year into this, how many COVID deaths the lockdowns have prevented. Likewise, when you have terminal cancer and your doctor suggests the option of chemotherapy, you should ask, and your doctor should tell you, how unpleasant the chemotherapy will be and what the side effects will be. For the lockdowns, we should ask, and our leaders and experts should have told us, what the harms of the lockdowns would be, and now that we are a year into this, what those harms have been. Our leaders have not answered those questions, so I will. In this book, I ask, can we quantify the harms of lockdowns and compare the harms to the benefits of COVID deaths prevented to determine whether the lockdowns were worth it? Did the lockdowns cause more harm than benefit? Seem like reasonable questions to ask. First, I should say that I have bent over backward in this book and in my writings to lean toward overestimating the lethality of COVID and the benefits of our lockdown strategy, and to be conservative in my calculations and leaning toward underestimating the harms of the lockdown strategy. I do not want to leave myself open to criticism that I am exaggerating. I do not need to exaggerate. All the facts and data are on my side. The first part of this book is a human benefit-harm analysis, where I estimate how many COVID deaths the lockdowns may be preventing and how that balances against the harms the lockdowns have caused. This analysis is in human terms rather than dollar terms. It is in terms of lost happiness and other harms, and lost and gained time of life from
Sample complete. Ready to continue?